Hello, can you hear me? Holly's heart started racing. Her palms began to sweat. She switched the phone to her other hand and wiped her palm on her skirt. Her hands had never sweated like this before. "It's Burns," the unpleasant, raspy voice sounded again. "So, have you made a decision? I'll be waiting tomorrow at 10 a.m. with all the documents. Don't worry about the notary, I'll bring one myself. The Orient restaurant. And don't be late. If you don't show up, you'll regret it." Holly momentarily forgot what he even wanted from her. Taking a deep breath, she calmed down a bit. Whether it was from bitter thoughts or the fact that the day had turned cool, making her feel cold in the now large, empty apartment, Holly felt a chill. Left alone with her 5-year-old son, Holly Kinsey tried to keep her husband's business afloat and provide a decent life for herself and her child. But circumstances had put her in a no-win situation. Oh, if only Seth were still alive. Holly couldn't fully grasp that her husband was gone and would never come back. Every morning, upon waking, she would try to hear his steady breathing. It took several minutes before the bitter reality brought her back down to earth. Seth was gone. He would never return. She would get up, make the bed, and head to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, oatmeal, pancakes, and coffee. Just like in the past, happy life when there were 3 of them. After breakfast, an empty, meaningless day filled with mundane tasks would begin. It was on one of those days that she received the offer to sell Seth's business. Burns was adamant, he wouldn't take no for an answer. Holly just wanted him to leave her alone, but who was she to him? Realizing she couldn't put her son in danger, she decided to send him to spend the summer with his grandmother in the countryside, to the mother of her late husband. Grandma Barbara adored her grandson and was always happy to have him visit. Holly understood that Burns and his cronies might not reach the village right away, but in the city? There was no hiding from them in the city. After spending a few days with her mother-in-law and son, Holly packed her things, kissed Cameron, and got in the car to head back to the city. On the way, Holly thought about how things could have turned out differently. But they hadn't. Her husband Seth had been an enterprising man, risky and brave. He always dreamed of providing a decent life for his family. But apparently, at some point, he had lost his caution. A year ago, he died in a mysterious accident. Since then, Holly had been raising her son alone and running the business. It wasn't easy. Holly constantly faced difficulties. The business was doing well, but competitors always tried to outmaneuver her, aiming to bring her business down to a point where it could never recover. She didn't give up, she wanted their son Cameron to have something to inherit from his father. However, not long ago, Mr. Burns became interested in her. It was said that this man had criminal connections, and in the city and region, he was known as an influential businessman with ties to the right people in the government. To create a positive image, he engaged in charity work. Holly knew from her husband that Seth had received offers to sell the business before, but he always refused them. As she drove back to the city, Holly clearly understood that no one would help her now. Burns had connections everywhere, and he was a well-known, respectable, and influential person. Most likely, Holly would be accused of threatening someone. Her heart felt heavy and desolate. The unbearable feeling of hopelessness didn't leave her for a minute. She had felt this way many years ago, somewhere near this very road she was now taking back to the city. That day, she and her father had gone to the forest to pick mushrooms. Burke, her father, was an avid mushroom picker and had gotten her into it too. "Holly, I've heard there are a lot of mushrooms in the forest. Will you come with me tomorrow?" "Of course, Dad," Holly replied. "Were you planning to go without me?" "No way, I want to go too, so we'll go together." "Then get ready to wake up early," her father smiled. "We're leaving first thing in the morning." On Saturday morning, Holly and her father got up early and left the city. The road to the forest was short, and within an hour, they were there. Both were in high spirits, and the weather was perfect. They ventured deep into the forest, the path was beautiful and clayey. Picking mushrooms was easy. There was no grass in the forest, the ground was covered with a carpet of pine needles and patches of moss. The mushrooms were visible from afar. Soon, their basket started filling up. Her father was not lagging behind but rather leading the way. Holly was so engrossed that at one point, she lost sight of her father. Suddenly, she heard his frightened, alarmed cry. She was terrified. The forest, still enchanting, now seemed unfriendly and mockingly indifferent. She didn't have to run far. Her father lay on the ground near a fallen tree, groaning and writhing in pain, his teeth clenched. "Dad, Dad, what's wrong?" Holly rushed to her father. "Are you hurt? What happened?" "My leg, Holly, my leg," her father groaned. "Did you break it?" "Dad, why is there blood?" Holly began to panic. "A fracture, probably open," her father groaned, almost losing consciousness. Holly was at a loss, she didn't know what to do or how to help her father. She took out her phone from her pocket, but there was no signal. Then Holly remembered that they had a first aid kit. They always took it with them to the forest. She pulled the life-saving box from her backpack and started providing first aid to her father. Holly tied a rubber tourniquet above his knee, ripped the pant leg at the fracture site, applied a cotton gauze pad to the wound, and bandaged it. She didn't know what to do next. Her father suddenly groaned and came to. She made him unclench his teeth and take 2 painkillers. "Dad, Dad, hold on, I'll go to the road and maybe catch a car. Please lie still and don't get up." Holly got up from her knees and listened. There was no wind, the trees stood silently, making no sound. The railway was to the right, Holly remembered this well. She knew that a highway ran parallel to the railway. She hoped to reach the road, find someone, and that someone would be able to help, take her father to the nearest hospital. Holly reached the highway quickly. Within 5 minutes, she could distinctly hear the sound of cars passing by. Finally, she emerged from the forest. Before her was a strip of clear-cut forest, and beyond it, the life-saving highway. Holly climbed up the roadside embankment and waited anxiously. The first car didn't even slow down at her request to stop. Maybe the people were in too much of a hurry, or perhaps they deemed Holly untrustworthy or undeserving of help. Determined to stop the second car heading towards the city, Holly stepped into the middle of the road, spreading her arms wide. She waved and shouted loudly. "Stop! Please, stop! I beg you!" The car slowed down and pulled over. The driver cracked open the door and asked loudly. "Miss, what's happened?" "There's someone in the forest who's hurt, he broke his leg. It's an open fracture, he needs to be taken to the hospital urgently. Please help. It's my dad." The driver glanced at his watch, opened the glove compartment, and took out a first aid kit. Then he removed the keys from the ignition and locked the car. "Let's go," he said. "Is he far? Do you remember the way?" "I do. I marked the path by breaking branches. I'll find it." Her father, grimacing in pain, lay in the same position. He turned his head towards them only when they were almost upon him. "How are you feeling?" the man asked, carefully examining the leg. "Is the pain severe?" "It's a bit less now. My daughter gave me some medicine. She did well. She applied the tourniquet correctly and bandaged the wound." "Yes," Burke agreed. "She did well. All right then, you'll need to bear it a little longer. We'll apply temporary splints now. I'll carry you to the car." "How much do you weigh?" "About 150 pounds, I think." "That's fine," the man said. "How are you going to carry him alone?" Holly worried. "What if you stumble? It's heavy for one person. Let's carry him together." "No need, I can manage alone. I have experience. You carry the mushrooms, no point in letting them go to waste." After securing the broken leg with makeshift splints, the man addressed Burke. "All right, I'm going to lift you now. Are you ready?" "Yes, ready," Burke replied. "What's your name, young man?" "My name is Seth. I'm Burke. And this is my daughter, Holly." "Nice to meet you," Seth said, and he deftly hoisted Burke onto his shoulders so that the injured leg was undisturbed. They moved slowly and reached the car within 15 minutes. Seth asked Holly to unlock the car. After laying Burke on the back seat, he exhaled and wiped his sweaty forehead. "How are you, Burke?" Seth asked again. "I'm all right, thank you. I'll drive you to the city hospital now." "Yes, let's go." "I'll manage," Burke replied. Seth looked at Holly. "Thank you so much," she said. Only now did Holly's anxiety for her father's safety finally ease. She felt that she was in the presence of a real man, selfless and reliable, someone who wouldn't abandon them in their time of need. 2 hours later, they were at the hospital. Burke was immediately operated on. His health and life were no longer in danger. "Yes, you were very lucky," the attending surgeon told Holly. "It was crucial not to stay in the forest with such a severe injury. Sepsis could have set in." Holly left the trauma unit, not remembering the mushrooms left in Seth's car or her jacket. Her mind was consumed with one thought: Dad is safe. The worst is over. Holly. Holly turned her head at the sound of her name. She saw Seth sitting on a bench in front of the trauma unit entrance. Holly brushed a strand of hair off her forehead and even tried to smile. The smile didn't come out right. "So, how is everything? How's Burke?" Seth asked as Holly sat down next to him. "Thank you. Everything's fine. He's been operated on." "Good to hear. Let me give you a ride home." "Aren't you in a hurry?" "Not anymore. The football match is over." "I'm so sorry," Holly said. "No big deal. Shall we go?" "Yes, please, if it's not too much trouble," Holly agreed. At her building, Seth stopped the car and unloaded the baskets of mushrooms from the trunk. Holly took out her wallet from her jacket pocket. "I should probably pay you for everything. I only have $50 on me. If that's not enough, I can bring more." "Oh no, absolutely not," Seth said. "You won't get off that easily. First, you need to give me your phone number, and second, you need to treat me to some of those mushrooms." Holly smiled, and Seth blushed slightly, which suited him quite well. She dictated her phone number to him. "You'll get to try the mushrooms later." Seth helped Holly carry the baskets to the elevator and, with a smile, headed back to his car. "Goodbye then. I'll call you soon. Let me know how Burke is doing, all right?" Holly nodded. At that moment, she realized who her soul had been yearning for. The one who appeared in her dreams as she read great love novels. Seth called exactly a week later. "Hello, Holly," he said simply, as if they had known each other for a long time and had just parted ways yesterday. "How's Burke?" "Oh, hello, Seth." "Thank you, he's doing well," Holly replied. "I'm glad to hear he's recovering," Seth continued. "You know, Holly, I'd like to invite you to my hometown tomorrow. We have a celebration. How do you feel about that?" "Oh, this is so unexpected. Where exactly, and what's the occasion?" "I'm a paratrooper, and I'd like to invite you to a town called Viewstone, not far from here. Will you come?" Holly didn't rush to answer. She asked Seth for a few minutes to think it over. "Can I call you back with my final answer?" "Of course, I'll be waiting." Holly didn't answer Seth immediately because she didn't want to meet him and travel to his hometown. She and her mom had planned to visit her father in the hospital together. They hadn't managed to do it together so all week because her mom had been working, but she had a day off tomorrow, and Holly didn't know what to do. "Mom, Seth just called. The guy who helped Dad. He invited me on a trip tomorrow, but we're supposed to visit Dad. What should I do?" "Seth. Lauren asked thoughtfully. Oh, I remember. Where does he want to go? To his hometown, to Viewstone. Viewstone? Well, go then, her mom replied. I'll visit your dad on my own. You've been visiting him almost every day, and you can't upset Seth. If it weren't for him, who knows how your mushroom-picking trip would have ended. Go, honey. Seth seems like a good guy. Such young men don't mistreat girls. He arrived for her around noon, just as they had arranged the day before. The 2-hour journey passed much quicker than the day they had taken Burke to the hospital. Back then, Holly was worried about her father's health, mentally urging the car to go faster. But now, she didn't even notice the time passing. Seth was joking and telling interesting stories. About a mile before reaching Viewstone, Seth glanced at Holly and said, "There's a lake nearby. How about a swim? Holly, this lake is really beautiful. I'll take a dip, and you can do as you like. The weather is hot today." He turned off the highway onto a dirt road, and within a few minutes, they arrived at the shore of a beautiful forest lake. "It's gorgeous," Holly exclaimed. "I had no idea we had such beautiful lakes in our area." "What's it called?" "Blue Water Lake," Seth replied. "Are you going to swim?" "No, I'll just enjoy the scenery." "I don't have a swimsuit." Seth quickly stripped off his clothes and headed towards the water. Holly couldn't help but admire his athletic physique. What's that under his left shoulder blade? She wondered to herself. It looks like a scar. Was he wounded once? After a quick swim, Seth dressed, and they continued their journey. "Please forgive me," Holly began, "but what happened to your back? Is it a wound?" "Yes, a bullet wound," Seth answered reluctantly. "It happened at war. We got ambushed. I was hit. A sergeant saved me. He carried me out. It was my second year of service." "I see. And what happened after that?" Holly couldn't help but ask. "After that? Hospital. The doctors forbade me from parachuting and many other things I wanted to do. They just forbade." "Were you discharged?" "No, I submitted my resignation. I didn't want to serve in the recruitment office or anywhere like that. I didn't go through training just to shuffle papers." "And the sergeant who saved you, is he still alive?" "Cameron is alive, thank God." Seth smiled. "When we get home, I'll show you some pictures. I have a whole album from my training and service." "Oh, but why are we talking about me all the time? Tell me something about yourself. I hardly know anything about you. Are you studying or working?" "I just graduated from architecture college," Holly replied. "I'm a designer by profession, now looking for a job." "What do you do?" "I started my own business. We cook and deliver delicious meals. The business is still getting established, but it's showing promise. We've covered our costs and are starting to make a decent profit." Seth fell silent, focusing intently on the road. Then he said to Holly, "Well, we're almost there. Just around the corner is Viewstone. My mom is waiting for us," I called and told her. "She's a simple woman, worked as a cook her whole life." I followed in her footsteps. They entered Viewstone, a cozy little town. Seth stopped in front of a house that looked like a gingerbread cottage. The house was sturdy and well-maintained, and the yard behind the fence was neatly kept, with paved paths among the flower beds. In Seth's home, they received a warm welcome. His mom, Barbara, had baked a pie for her son's arrival. "I thought you'd come with your friends, Seth," she said in a pleasant voice. "But you brought a girl. How lovely. Come inside. What's your name, beautiful?" "Holly," the guest replied. Barbara took Holly's small hand in her warm one and introduced herself. "My name is Barbara." The house smelled of pie, fresh baking, and flowers. "Seth," she said to her son, "maybe you shouldn't bother with the barbecue today. I have plenty of food. I agree, but I don't know how the guest will feel about it, Mom. Holly, what do you think? Can we skip the barbecue? Of course, we can skip it, Holly agreed. Pie is better. They sat at the table. Holly felt a sense of calm she had never experienced before. Seth doesn't drink alcohol at all, Barbara said, placing a decanter of wine on the table. But Holly, let's have a glass to celebrate him, shall we? Let's toast to our paratrooper. The big summer sun slowly set behind the horizon. The sky lit up with greenish golden and bright blue stars. The scent of mint wafted through the open window from the garden. Crickets started to chirp. A warm August night was beginning. In the morning, they drank tea with strawberry jam. Barbara had made pancakes and was treating her dear guests. Seth was showing Holly photographs. Here's Cameron, he said, handing Holly a photo. My brother and savior. My brother in arms. Holly looked at the photo. A blonde, blue-eyed guy in a paratrooper uniform was smiling back at her. For a moment, Holly thought he might come to life. She looked at the photo again and set it aside. As she flipped through the album, she noticed some dates on the photographs and inadvertently calculated Seth's age. You're only 27, she asked her new acquaintance. Well, 28 in a month, he replied. Why, do I look old? No, not at all. How could you be old? Holly quickly tried to correct the ambiguity of her question. You don't look old at all, you just look very mature and dignified. I thought you were around 35. Aha, gotcha, Holly, Seth smiled. You didn't think I was old, but you assumed I was 35. Holly blushed again and said in a somewhat childish manner. Don't be picky. I didn't assume anything. Well, you're right about my age. Since 10th grade, I stood out among my peers. They were still beardless boys, and I had already started shaving. Sometimes the principal would say to me, Seth, you're the oldest, you could tell the kids to talk less in class and listen to the teachers more, but you talk with them. And I'd reply, why am I the oldest? We're all the same age. So, Holly, even in school, they considered me an old man. But I never took offense. As Barbara saw them off, she wished them a safe journey and said to Holly. Holly, I hope you visit us again. Please come back, dear. All right, Holly replied. And thank you for everything. 2 days later, Holly called Seth first. It happened because Burke was coming home from the hospital. Seth, hi, my dad's been discharged. He really wants to meet you. So, he's inviting you over. Will you come? Yes, of course, Holly, Seth replied. When? How about tomorrow at 8 in the evening? All right, sounds good. The night before Seth's visit, Holly slept poorly, unable to understand what was happening. They had met by chance, and he had helped. People should help in such situations, right? Well, he liked me, asked for my phone number, but then what? He should have called, arranged a date, come with flowers, taken me to a restaurant or nightclub. There should have been champagne, then another date. But what did he do? He stayed silent for a week, then called and took me to meet his mom in his hometown. He didn't make any moves or try to kiss me, which is good, but it's strange. If Dad hadn't wanted to see him, would he have gone another week without calling? Holly finally fell asleep well past midnight without answering her own questions. The next day, she and her mom spent the entire day preparing for dinner. Burke was anxious. Holly, he asked his daughter, what does the younger generation prefer nowadays? Should I put whiskey on the table instead of brandy? Dad, relax. Seth doesn't drink, Holly replied. How do you know that? Burke was surprised. Well, we've already met, Dad, while you were in the hospital. He took me to his town. Really? Her father continued in amazement. Why didn't I know? All in good time, dear, Burke's wife joked. Seth arrived punctually, exactly at 8 in the evening. This time, he brought flowers and a bag. He was wearing a white shirt that highlighted his strong tanned arms and muscular neck, stylish blue jeans, and trendy sneakers. "Did I get the right apartment? Is the recovering patient here?" he asked Holly with a broad, handsome smile. "Yes, yes." Holly played along. "Hey, patient. Limp over here, you've got a visitor." While Burke made his way from the living room to the hallway with the sound of his crutches, Seth said to Holly. "Hello, Holly. I'm very glad to see you. And these are for you." She took the bouquet of tea roses and brought them to her face to fully appreciate their beauty and freshness. Seth gave Lauren a bouquet of white lilies and chrysanthemums. She appreciated the thoughtful gesture and placed the flowers in a tall glass vase with water, admiring the gift before setting it in the center of the table. Burke gratefully accepted a bottle of brandy in a box from his savior. "Seth," Burke said, clearly touched, "why did you? I should be the one serving you brandy today as a token of gratitude. You saved me. If it weren't for you, I might have lost my leg." "Come on, you're exaggerating, Burke," Seth replied. "Your main guardian angel is Holly, your daughter. If she hadn't been with you, you might indeed have lost your leg. I was just doing my duty. Anyone in my place would have done the same. Wouldn't you have helped me if I had broken my leg?" "Of course, I would have," Burke agreed. "I'd have tried to help if something like that happened. But still, thank you very much. Holly and I are very grateful to you." Seth was a great conversationalist. It seemed like he knew a bit about everything. Burke earnestly tried to fulfill his mission of getting their guest to drink some brandy, but it wasn't working. "I'm driving, Burke, I can't." "We'll have you stay the night, we have 3 rooms," the slightly tipsy host responded. After tea, Seth began to get ready to leave. "Thank you. Holly, will you walk me out?" "Of course," Holly nodded. Seth shook the homeowner's hand, wished him a speedy recovery, and headed for the door, thanking the hostess as well. "Please come by again, Seth," Lauren responded, flattered by the young man's compliments. "We'd love to have you anytime." It was warm and quiet outside, the town was falling asleep, preparing for the coming workday. Seth suggested they take a short walk. "Do you work tomorrow?" she asked. "Yes," Seth replied. "I work every day. Weekends are rare. Things don't take care of themselves. There's always planning, calculating, and anticipating to be done. In movies, they show someone becoming a businessman and instantly getting rich, then going on a vacation to the Pacific Islands." Holly listened to Seth and imagined this movie. Seth on the Canary Islands, swaying in a hammock and sipping a cocktail through a straw. And there she was, in a bikini. The sea was deep blue, and the palms were green and tall. She suddenly smiled, finding it funny and unrealistic. "I'm probably a bore, old-fashioned, huh, Holly?" Seth asked, seeing that the girl wasn't listening to him but was lost in her own dreams. "Why do you say that?" she asked, coming back to reality. "Because I don't know how to woo girls. I asked for your phone number but only called a week later. I didn't invite you to a restaurant but took you to meet my mom. I didn't offer you champagne or try to kiss you. That must be boring." Holly suddenly felt herself blushing. She felt ashamed because Seth had just articulated her exact thoughts from the previous night. God, was he a mind reader? How did he know she had been thinking exactly that about him just last night? The girl suddenly realized that he was a very sensitive, vulnerable person who understood both himself and others. She stopped, turned to him, and said, "No, Seth, you're wrong. You can't be like the others, it wouldn't suit you. You're genuine. You live with your heart. You're not deceitful." "Really?" "Of course, really," Holly replied. He took her small, beautiful hands in his strong ones, brought them to his lips and gently kissed them. Holly gently freed her hands from his, wrapped them around his strong neck, stood on tiptoe, and kissed Seth on the lips. Long and passionately. He lifted her into his arms and spun her around, just like Holly's dad used to do when she was a child. She clung to Seth, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions and immense happiness. After that evening, they met every day. The bond between them grew stronger. Holly indeed felt something indescribable when she looked at Seth. It was like she started to melt inside. Her mind was filled with a sticky, floral sweet syrup. Their dates were filled with sharing their deepest thoughts and anticipating the wonderful life that was about to come. Happiness is often called fleeting and elusive, but that's not true. Once it settles in your soul, it takes a firm place. It remains calm and bright, living on as the memory of enduring love. Autumn arrived unnoticed. The days grew shorter, and the evenings cooler. Seth loved autumn, but it took on a special meaning with his beloved by his side. On one fine September day, he proposed to Holly. Her eyes sparkled with happiness, and she accepted. On the morning of their wedding day, Holly, barely awake, realized something had changed in the world. Indeed, it had snowed. Snow lay on the withered grass, on the wires, and on the windowsills, on the swings in the yard. Holly involuntarily smiled, as happy moments spent with Seth since their chance meeting flashed before her eyes. Their first encounter in the forest, the trip to his mother's, the formal dinner, the walk through the night city, their first kiss, the confession of love, and the marriage proposal. It all seemed like a fairy tale, but it was reality. And today, she would become his wife. Seth was just as anxious as Holly. He understood that he was entering into marriage not out of whim or fleeting infatuation, but out of great love. He promised himself to be an attentive, sensitive, and caring husband, to support and protect Holly throughout their lives, and to make sure she never needed anything. During the ceremony, they exchanged vows of fidelity. Their fingers were adorned with wedding rings. A gentle kiss sealed their union, and the lovers embarked on a new chapter of their lives, as husband and wife. The wedding took place in one of the city's restaurants. There were quite a few guests, all close friends or relatives. Holly's father, Burke, knowing he had to perform the traditional father-daughter dance, worried about his leg. What if it failed him at the worst possible moment? He kept bending and straightening it, trying to make circular movements with his foot. The bride's mother, Lauren, sitting next to him, couldn't stand her husband's fidgeting and whispered, "Burke, calm down. Your leg won't fall off, you're not dancing ballet." "I know, but this is a very important moment. People will be watching. I don't want to let Holly down." "Don't worry, everything will be fine, my love," Lauren reassured him. When the host of the wedding evening announced the father-daughter dance, and Holly and Burke stepped out for the waltz, all the guests noted how attentive and caring the father of the bride was. He whispered something in her ear, smiled. How touching. Indeed, during the waltz, Burke, smiling warmly, asked Holly several times, "Holly, how am I doing? Am I dancing too awkwardly? How's my leg?" "Oh, Dad, you're doing great. If it weren't for your leg, I wouldn't be the happiest bride today." The next morning, Holly found a beautiful envelope on her bedside table. At first, she didn't understand where it had come from, as it wasn't there the night before. Nor was Seth nearby. "Seth, where are you?" she called out to her beloved. "Are you in the kitchen?" There was no response. Holly reached for the envelope, which was accompanied by a note. "Sweetheart, I'll be back soon, don't miss me. A tender kiss for you. While I'm away, prepare for a trip." Holly opened the envelope and took out 2 plane tickets. The destination filled her with joy. They were going to Bali. The very next day, the newlyweds set off on their long-awaited honeymoon. They were to spend 2 weeks on a paradise island. They enjoyed the peace and quiet, forgetting about their problems and worries. They spent a lot of time walking along the ocean shore, swimming in the warm waters, and admiring the beautiful sunsets. One morning, Seeing Seth lying in a hammock under the shade of palm trees, wearing colorful shorts and holding a cocktail, Holly couldn't help but laugh. "What's so funny, Holly?" he asked, surprised. "Seth, do you really read my mind?" "Yes, why? Do you remember that evening when you were at our place on my dad's invitation?" "Oh, of course, I remember. That evening we kissed for the first time." "Yes, exactly," Holly nodded and continued. "You said that a businessman is not someone who squanders money, lounging on a Pacific island, but someone who constantly improves their business and works tirelessly." "Yeah, I think I said that," Seth recalled. "In real life, that's how it is. You have to work all the time." "Yes, but that's not the point. For some reason, I imagined you relaxing on an island, and I laughed to myself at the thought of you in shorts and a hammock. And today I see you exactly as I imagined. It's like a dream come true. Although I wasn't dreaming, just imagining how it might look." "Really? So, am I just as you imagined? Am I funny?" "Seth, you're wonderful," Holly said sincerely. "You're the best." Seth awkwardly jumped out of the hammock, scooped Holly into his arms, spun her around for a few seconds, then gently carried her into their hotel room. One evening, Seth and Holly sat on the shore, admiring the sunset. "I'm so happy we're here." "I love you so much," Seth said. Holly smiled. "I love you too, my dear husband." "Seth, do you want a boy or a girl more?" "Let's have a boy first, then a girl. I want us to have many children, and I hope they're as beautiful as you." "And as you," Holly added. He kissed her. In such moments, she completely lost her ability to breathe and think clearly. She only felt that her skin was burning, and Seth's fingers and lips were searing her. Or perhaps it was his heat that scorched her from head to toe, igniting an insatiable yearning in every cell of her body. Upon returning from their honeymoon, Holly finally found the job she had always dreamed of. Her resume and portfolio of creative works impressed the management of a prestigious design center, and she was hired to work remotely. Seth's business was also thriving. The production of semi-finished products wasn't particularly complicated: good ingredients, spices, and proper techniques. 3 years ago, Seth had started his business by making patties using his mother Barbara's recipe. Back then, he rented a small space with 2 women, bought an electric meat grinder, and launched the production. Initially, they supplied products to a local cafe. Later, people appreciated the taste of the patties, and Seth started receiving offers to supply meat products to stores and even fast food restaurants. He worked tirelessly, and his business flourished. He expanded his production, hired more workers, and began supplying semi-finished products to larger stores and restaurants. His products became very popular because Seth used only the freshest and highest quality ingredients and strictly followed traditional recipes. Soon, he became one of the most successful producers of meat semi-finished products in the city. However, not everyone was pleased with the young entrepreneur's success. Some people in the city were envious and sought to disrupt his successful business. There were even those who wanted to take over his profitable enterprise or buy it out. Seth often talked about this to his young wife. Holly, of course, was worried for her husband and asked him to be cautious, especially when their first child was born a year after the wedding. The question of what to name their son was never up for debate. Seth and Holly had long agreed that if they had a boy, they would name him Cameron, in honor of Seth's comrade who had saved his life. The birth of their son inspired Seth to new ambitions. He decided to expand his business. Instead of buying meat from various agricultural producers, Seth decided to establish his own livestock enterprise and raise pork and beef on his own farm. There were many villages in the region that once had dairy farms and livestock complexes. Now they were abandoned and falling into disrepair, but they could still be restored. Seth found such a village. It was located not far from the city and had a decent dirt road leading to it. Several buildings in the livestock complex were still intact and could be easily restored to working condition. Seth leased the abandoned farm and set about revitalizing it with great enthusiasm. The local residents welcomed this development with joy. Many able-bodied people who still lived in the village eagerly went to work for Seth. Life in the village began to revive. Several families returned from the city. Seth worked with the administration to restore the medical center, establish regular transport connections with the village, and dreamed of reopening the club, library, post office, and elementary school. Many doubted the young man's initiative, saying, "He'll get rich and then abandon everything, running off with the money somewhere." Those who knew Seth believed in him. If he took on a task and set a goal, he would see it through to the end. Holly saw how hard her beloved husband was working and did everything she could to help him. She knew that Seth was doing this for the people. On the rare weekends he had off, the young father never left his son's side. Little Cameron, still so innocent, was also very happy to be with his father. He felt the love from Seth. Whenever he heard Cameron's voice, he would pause for a moment, then start smiling, babbling loudly, and kicking his little legs. A few years later, the farm began producing its own products, and Seth realized he was on the right track. The high-quality raw materials from the farm increased the demand for his meat products. In the city and region, more and more customers preferred Seth's products. However, with the growing popularity of his products, Seth also felt the growing animosity from his competitors. Not just animosity, hatred. In his conversations with Holly, she started to notice that Seth frequently mentioned the name Burns. One day, she asked, "Who is this Burns? You don't know?" Seth was surprised. "He's our local tycoon. He has the biggest business in town. Several stores, restaurants, the city market. A lot depends on him here." "And what kind of relationship do you have with him?" "With me? I have no relationship with him," Seth shrugged. "I'm independent. I don't buy meat at the market. He can't influence me." But not long ago, someone from his circle hinted that Burns might make me an offer. "And what kind of offer?" "Well, supposedly Burns wouldn't mind buying my business for $10 million. "What?" Holly was astonished. "And what did you say?" "I didn't say anything. It wasn't a concrete offer, just a feeler. Maybe he thinks I'll get excited hearing that number and run to him." But I stayed silent. "Is your business really worth that much?" Holly asked. "That's a lot of money. Even if they offered me $500 million, I'd still refuse." "But why?" "Because, my love, that's not why I started this business. I'm not interested in making money and moving to some island in the Pacific or Indian Ocean. I want to work for the people, for you and for our son. I want Cameron to grow up and continue this work if he's interested. Selling a good, profitable business is easy, doing your work well, honestly, and with integrity is the real challenge. Do you agree?" "Yes, of course I agree. Besides, living on an island and doing nothing for a long time would be very boring." Mentions of Burns became more frequent. It seemed that Seth, without realizing it, was falling under his influence. In Seth's stories, Holly increasingly heard, "Burns said," "Burns suggested," "Burns advises." One evening, Seth came home from work and said, "Burns invited me to go hunting this weekend. He says they have licenses. I don't know what to do. Should I go or not? What do you think? Are you a hunter? I didn't know you liked hunting. Do you have a gun?" Holly was surprised. "Yes, of course. I used to love hunting. So, should I go or not? Are you already talking to him?" Holly asked, feeling a pang in her chest. "You said you didn't depend on him." "Yes, I have to communicate with him," Seth replied. "You see, Holly, you need to be aware of what's happening in the local business community. It's not friendship. Communicating with Burns is like being in a club, a closed club. If you're in, people see you differently. For example, the tax office, fire department, and other services. It helps build and develop a business, you understand? Yes, I understand. So, what should I do? Seth, why are you asking me? You know I can't forbid you. You've already decided to go, haven't you? Holly replied. Honestly, yes, you're right. I'm going to go. You can't be a loner, you have to maintain relationships with people like yourself. As she saw Seth off to the hunt, Holly felt a chill in her heart and said, Seth, please be careful, remember Cameron and me, and call often. Of course, my love. I always think of you both. Don't worry, everything will be fine, I'll call, he replied, kissing his wife and son before leaving. An hour later, Seth called. Hello, my love, everything is fine. I'm afraid the signal will be poor as we enter the forest, so if I can't call, don't worry. Kiss Cameron for me. Holly's heart was uneasy all day. Seth didn't call. Holly tried to reach him several times, but he was out of reach. Finally, in the evening, the long-awaited call came. Hello, Holly, my love, please don't worry, Seth said. I probably won't be home tonight. Don't worry, I'm at the hospital. It's nothing serious, I'm injured but not badly, just a shoulder wound. They already operated and stitched it up. If the doctors allow, I'll come home tomorrow. Hearing this, Holly's vision darkened, and she almost fainted, but she pulled herself together, took a deep breath, and asked. Where are you, Seth? Which hospital? St. Luke's. Holly, please don't worry. I'm not worried, I'm coming to see you. She ended the call and immediately called her mom. Hello, Mom, I'm bringing Cameron to you. I need to go to the hospital, she said. Seth is there, he's injured. Holly, what do you mean injured? Why? Mom, I don't know yet, wait for us, I'm coming. Leaving her son with her parents, Holly rushed to the hospital. She knew she wasn't a doctor and couldn't help Seth medically, but she wanted to be with him in that moment. She needed to see his eyes, to know he was truly safe. After the operation, Seth was moved to a private room. When Holly entered, Seth tried to get up to greet her. His face was pale, his movements slower than usual. Seth, please don't get up, Holly stopped him. You need rest. The doctor said you lost some blood and need to move as little as possible. You haven't recovered yet. Please, don't get up. Seth smiled, lay back down, and said. I am such a fool. I didn't listen to my wife. Now I'm lying here, getting shots and taking pills. Holly sat on the edge of the hospital bed, leaned down, and kissed his dry lips. You have a fever, I think. Do you want something to drink? I'll get it. How are you? Tell me how it happened. Seth closed his eyes and whispered. I'm fine now that you're here. I'm always fine when you're with me. How's Cameron? Did you leave him with your parents? Yes, he's with them, dear. He's probably asleep by now. Today, he said, Pa, several times, can you believe it? He was probably calling for you. If everything's okay, I'll bring him tomorrow so you two can meet. Seth, please, tell me how it happened. One of the hunters made a mistake. He said he thought he was shooting at a moose. There were a lot of trees and greenery, poor visibility, and he fired. But I was there. The doctor said the wound isn't dangerous, I just lost a lot of blood, so I'm weak. They didn't bandage me right away in the forest, everyone was shocked. Seth, are you sure he made a mistake? Holly suddenly asked. Maybe he's just saying that. Oh, sweetheart. Of course, he made a mistake. Why would he do it on purpose? We barely know each other, and we've never had any conflicts or animosity. He's just an inexperienced hunter. He said he bought his first gun only 6 months ago. If he was a good shot, he wouldn't have missed. Maybe he didn't want to hit you. Maybe it was a warning, a hint. Holly suggested. Seth was silent. A week later, Seth left the hospital and only went back for bandages. The investigation was brief. No intentional harm was found, just an ordinary mistake. The court ordered the suspect to compensate for medical expenses and moral damages. Seth didn't file any appeals. He accepted the court's decision. Life had to go on. He needed to forget the incident, continue working, and love his family. Raise his son. Time passed. The hunting accident slowly faded from memory, but Holly noticed that Seth avoided mentioning burns when talking about work. Holly understood that her husband linked his injury on the hunt to Burns' offer to buy his business. Seth often traveled to the livestock farm. The road there, though close, included a stretch from the highway to the village that passed through the forest. This part was only about 2 miles long, but the forest there was dense and unwelcoming. Holly had only gone there once with her husband and immediately noted this. She always worried about Seth when she knew he was driving to the farm alone. Several times, she suggested he hire a personal driver who could also act as a bodyguard. "Seth, please, find a strong guy who can help protect you in case of danger. Why are you so careless about your safety?" "Holly, why do I need a bodyguard?" Seth laughed. "Do you think I can't take care of myself? Have you forgotten that your husband is a paratrooper and a candidate for Master of Sports in Sambo? Forgot that, didn't you?" At these moments, Seth would make a stern face and jokingly say, "I'm Rambo, dear. Rambo. Understand?" Holly would laugh and forget her fears. And Seth would say, "But seriously, soon I'll have a partner and a bodyguard. My friend Cameron will return from the army, and everything will be fine. Then we won't fear anyone. We talked yesterday. He has a year left on his contract. Time flies." But Seth never got to see Cameron again. That fateful morning, getting ready for work, he joked, promising Holly and 5-year-old Cameron that they would go on a picnic over the weekend. "I want to go to Grandma Barbara's," Cameron suddenly said. "To Grandma's? Well, okay. We'll go to Grandma's then. I'll rest, lie in bed, and do nothing." "Sure, we'll go to Grandma's, son." After Seth left, Holly made a strong coffee, sat in her husband's favorite chair, and watched Cameron playing with his building blocks on the floor. Seth's words echoed in her mind. "I'll rest, lie in bed, and do nothing." 2 hours passed, no more. The phone rang, and Holly answered. Holly Kinsey, an unfamiliar male voice asked. "Yes, hello. Who is this?" "I'm Officer Ed Wally," the speaker introduced himself. "What happened, officer?" Holly's heart tightened with dread, anticipating the worst. "Please calm down and accept my condolences. Your husband, Seth, was killed in a traffic accident." Holly involuntarily screamed. Her ears rang. Cameron, hearing his mother's cry, ran to her. She hugged her frightened son, feeling her hands and feet grow cold. She found the strength to ask, "Where is he now?" "They've taken him to the morgue," the officer replied dryly. Many people attended Seth's funeral, but Holly only remembered Cameron's piercing cries. "Daddy! Daddy, why is he sleeping? Mommy, wake him up. Cameron, be strong, son, be strong. We must be strong, just like your daddy was," Holly whispered through her tears, looking at her husband's lifeless body. The woman shut herself off from everyone, not wanting to see anyone. For the first time, Holly was afraid of her own home. It no longer felt like a friend but seemed empty, echoing, and like a lurking beast, an enemy. It was a different home now. Without Seth. Without its heart and soul. Little Cameron, watching his mother, also became quiet and pensive. Holly knew she needed to move on and raise her son, but she struggled to find the strength. Yet, she did. After a 10-day mourning period, she returned to work, no longer as a remote designer, but as the owner and head of the business her late husband had built. No one was held accountable for Seth's death. The investigation report concluded that the vehicle Seth was driving had not been inspected for 2 years and had faulty brakes. Additionally, the driver exceeded the speed limit on a sharp turn, causing the car to break through the barrier and fall 11 feet into a ditch. As a result, the crash caused fatal injuries, and Seth died on the spot. This conclusion satisfied the police. The cause of death was established, the driver was at fault. The case was closed and archived. But Holly knew it was not like that at all. She had driven with her husband many times and knew how cautious and attentive he was on turns. Seth could not have exceeded the speed limit on a sharp turn with an 11-foot-high embankment. Seth valued life. He wanted to live very much. For his wife and son. From the beginning, Holly suspected it was not an accident but a deliberate murder. The shot during the hunt was just a warning. She knew that after the injury, Seth repeatedly received offers to sell his business. He refused and continued to work. And now he was gone. Holly felt everything Seth had to endure by refusing Burns. As she returned to the city, the same questions kept spinning in her head. What to do? Where to seek help? Holly understood that no one would dare to speak out in her defense. Everything in the city was in Burns' hands. His people were everywhere. Everyone served him. In the first months of her work, she received an offer to sell the business, but she immediately refused. The first call was followed by a second. This time, it contained threats. Holly recorded the call and went to the police, stating that she was being threatened and hindered in running her business. Her complaint was accepted, but no results followed. There were no grounds to initiate a criminal case. The police officer explained that it was impossible to determine who called Holly, as the SIM card was not registered to anyone. The call was anonymous. The phrase, "You could meet the same fate," did not contain explicit threats. "Holly, if something concrete happens, call us, come by. We won't ignore your complaint, but in this case, there's nothing I can do." Recently, Burns had become more persistent. Holly was openly threatened, told that she would lose the business regardless of whether she agreed to sell it for the offered amount. The money proposed was not even a tenth of what the established business could fetch if sold freely. But Holly might not even receive that. They could force her to hand over the business without payment or eliminate her physically. Seth's death was proof of that, although the police claimed it was an accident. The upcoming day tormented her. The pain in her head flared up again. Holly touched her temple. No, it wasn't pain, it was an unpleasant thought trying to surface. Orion Restaurant, 10 in the morning. If you don't come, you'll regret it. In the city, Cameron, Seth's friend, stayed for only 2 days without any particular business. He left for the town where he had spent his childhood and youth. He looked out the window, watching the passing landscapes. His mind involuntarily drifted back to the past. Cameron had been away from the town for 9 long years, except for that morning week when he came to bid farewell to his mother. Now, there were no relatives in the town, but many acquaintances remained. Childhood friends were still there. Cameron traveled with mixed feelings toward his hometown. On one hand, he loved the town because it was where he was born, took his first breath, his first step, spoke his first word, and saw for the first time the people who gave him life. On the other hand, it was in this town that he experienced the injustice of betrayal by those he considered friends. Cameron grew up as a strong, healthy boy. His physical abilities were noticed by the physical education teacher in school, who advised Cameron's mother to introduce her son to sports school coaches. This is how Cameron met Dennis Smith, the karate coach. For 6 years, Cameron trained under the young and talented coach and achieved excellent results. He won several junior competitions and was considered the absolute town champion in his age category. After graduating from school, Cameron, as a well-known athlete in the city, was gladly admitted to the local university's law faculty. Cameron prepared to become a lawyer, although sports still occupied most of his life. Being a student, he often disappeared for sports camps, defending the university's honor at tournaments of various scales. During that time, Cameron was more popular than ever. Everyone wanted to be friends with the karate champion. Even the dean of the faculty greeted Cameron warmly and always asked, "How are you?" In the university, only one student enjoyed such popularity, Todd Burns. And it was understandable. Todd Burns was the son of the most influential person in the city, the local meat king, Warwick Burns. Todd certainly didn't want to study at the local college, but he had to after being expelled from a university in New York. Those in the know said Todd hardly studied in New York, instead frequenting clubs and coercing professors into giving him undeserved passing grades on exams. Finally, the audacity of this provincial boy became intolerable. He was transferred with scandal to an institute located in the town where he was born and raised. Before university, Cameron had no friendly relations with Todd Burns. The guys didn't know each other at all, not even indirectly. Burns surrounded himself with wealthy youth like himself, while Cameron's friends were ordinary guys. But their paths crossed at university. Todd was the initiator of their acquaintance. Older and more experienced, Todd understood that by making Cameron his friend, he would enhance his own status. Everyone would see that even the town karate champion was friends with Todd. This meant Todd was respected and even feared by well-known athletes. One day, as Cameron hurried to practice with a sports bag slung over his shoulder, Todd, standing with classmates at the entrance to the academic building, called out to the athlete. "Cameron, off to practice?" "At Palmer Street?" "Yeah," Cameron replied. "All right, let's go." Todd waved his hand and pointed to his BMW, "We're heading the same way." Cameron didn't refuse and got into the car. They didn't talk much on the way, but the fact of their acquaintance was established. "Cameron, if you ever have any problems, let me know, we'll help. You bring glory to both the university and the town, we owe you for that," Todd said, dropping off Cameron. Cameron understood that Todd's words were insincere. The acquaintance happened, but it didn't particularly please him. He wasn't flattered by the idea that a friendship with Burns would open certain doors for him in life. Cameron had long understood that only his own efforts and daily hard work lead a person to success. He knew that if he weren't a well-known athlete in the city, but just an ordinary student, Todd would never have initiated their acquaintance, never would have invited him into his car, and never would have offered to give him a ride anywhere. A few days after this incident, Todd extended a friendly invitation to come to a Saturday party. "Cameron, come over to my place tonight, let's chill. There will be girls, we'll dance. I know you're a sports guy, but you still gotta relax. So, should I expect you?" "Yeah, alright, I'll come," Cameron replied. Finding himself at Todd's home, Cameron felt out of place. The son of the meat king lived alone in a 3-bedroom apartment in the city center. The apartment was spacious. Cameron couldn't help but think that just the living room alone was larger than the entire apartment he shared with his mom. Why does he stay in this apartment alone? Cameron involuntarily wondered. It must feel uncomfortable and lonely to live in such a large space. Cameron didn't enjoy the party. It seemed like the attendees weren't there to have fun but to flaunt their clothes, latest model phones, and boast about their luxurious vacations. Most of them openly displayed their high social status and the opportunities their parents provided. Cameron left before the party ended. Stepping outside, he took a deep breath. Twilight had settled over the city. The streets, illuminated by streetlights, were empty, with leaves lazily rustling in the trees. Cameron was relieved to finally leave that stuffy and fake event behind. Time passed. Burns continued to show the whole university that Cameron was his friend. Twice, Todd brought his inseparable cronies, Gary and Mike, to Cameron's competitions. Todd made Gary and Mike loudly chant, "Cameron. Cameron," when Cameron began to win against his opponents. Cameron disliked this pretense because he despised both Gary and Mike and didn't want them uttering his name. But he couldn't forbid them from doing so. It was the fans' right, genuine or fake. For many students, confirmation of the rumors that Todd was friends with karate champion Cameron and personally trained him came with Cameron's invitation to Todd's birthday party. Yes, Todd invited Cameron among his closest friends to his parents' country house. Cameron wasn't thrilled, but due to his upbringing, he didn't dare refuse. He didn't want to offend Todd as a person, though he harbored some animosity toward him. Without much thought, Cameron decided to give him a kimono as a gift. He thought such a gift would appeal to the proud son of the Meat King. After all, a sports attribute indirectly indicated that Todd loved sports and probably knew some karate techniques. And indeed, Cameron was right. Todd was very pleased with the gift. He said as much in his reply. "Thank you, Master. I'll try to improve my humble martial arts skills. And in the future, I'll train in this kimono, remembering that it was gifted to me by one of the best karate practitioners in our country, my friend Cameron." Knowing that Todd was blatantly lying, the guests smirked and grinned, listening to his words. From the sidelines, it seemed like they were all smiling sweetly at the fake karateka. On that memorable May Day, Todd's parents' home was fully at the disposal of the reveling youth, with Todd himself leading the festivities. Cameron remembered that day for a long time, not because it was joyful and sunny, but because that day dramatically changed his entire future. After the congratulations, a real party began. Half-naked girls and boys swam in the pool, secluded themselves in the numerous rooms of the house. Someone twisted and danced to music booming from powerful acoustic amplifiers, while Todd paced back and forth in front of the gates, talking on the phone. It seemed like he was eagerly awaiting someone. Cameron watched from the gazebo, sipping on a cola, contemplating his chance to quietly leave the party. He hoped Todd would either head inside or move far enough away from the entrance so he could slip away unnoticed. Cameron didn't want Todd to make a public farewell, offering insincere words once again. After a while, Todd smiled and approached the gates to press the button that activated the sliding gate mechanism. Moments later, Todd's BMW pulled into the dacha's grounds, with Gary at the wheel and Mike beside him. The car's rear side windows were tinted, obscuring the view inside. The car stopped, Todd leaned in and said something to Gary, gesturing with his hand, indicating, "Take them to the backyard." Cameron couldn't help but wonder who Todd's friends had brought here. Quietly leaving the gazebo without drawing attention, he followed the car and its owner. The car turned behind the house and stopped in front of the entrance to a semi-basement room. The rear doors opened, and two girls got out of the car. Cameron knew them both. The first was another inseparable companion of Todd, third-year student Rose, and the second was freshman Drew. Seeing Rose wasn't surprising, she was part of Todd's inner circle. Among university students, rumors circulated that Rose was essentially Todd's girlfriend, nicknamed Todd's doll behind her back. Her reputation wasn't pristine, with gossip suggesting she deceitfully led naive freshman girls into Todd's bed. So, Cameron wasn't surprised to see third-year student Rose among the girls. But why was freshman Drew with her? Drew studied with Cameron in the same faculty. He knew her as a diligent, outstanding student who kept to herself despite being beautiful. She dedicated most of her free time to the library, actively participated in volunteer activities, and was involved in a music studio. Cameron couldn't understand why she ended up in Rose's company. Meanwhile, Todd and his arrivals headed towards the house. Todd led the way, with Rose beside him and Drew slightly behind. Gary and Mike completed the group. Rose whispered something into Todd's ear, while Drew walked, nervously scanning her surroundings as if assessing and memorizing the environment. Gary smirked, nudging Mike in the side and then nodding towards Drew. Cameron had a gut feeling that Drew was in for trouble. He realized she had been lured here deliberately, perhaps as a gift for Todd. Cameron wanted to thwart the villain's plans, but how could he do it? He could certainly rush to Drew, take her hand, and lead her away. He wasn't afraid of Todd or his friends, he knew he could handle all three of them in a minute. But was it right to act without Drew asking or wanting his intervention? Maybe she came here because she wanted to. In that case, any action aimed at rescuing her would be completely inappropriate. So, Cameron decided not to rush. After the group disappeared behind the basement doors, Cameron sat on a bench by the house, waiting for things to unfold. He didn't have to wait long. About 15 minutes later, the doors burst open, and Drew ran out. She looked like she'd been in a desperate struggle. Her hair was disheveled, her lip was bleeding, and her white blouse was completely unbuttoned. Hot on her heels was Todd, looking furious. "Stop! Stop, I said," he shouted, trying to catch and grab Drew. Drew was panicking, not knowing where to run or where to find safety. "Help!" she cried, running towards Cameron, who was still sitting on the bench. Cameron quickly stood up, positioning himself between Drew and Todd as Todd approached. "Oh, Cameron, it's you. Listen, the girl just misunderstood, well, something, got scared and started panicking and fighting. We just wanted to be nice to her, but she's not cooperative, Cameron." "Hey, you, not cooperative one, come here," Todd continued. "Come on, you won't get away, all my friends are here." "Cameron, give her to me." "She doesn't want to go to you," Cameron said, slowly backing away with Drew behind him. "Cameron, don't you understand? She's mine, my gift. Hand her over." "No," Cameron said. "Calm down, we're leaving." "What? Where do you think you're going?" "I'll hunt you down," Todd threatened, stepping towards Cameron more aggressively. "Give me that cheap girl." At one point, he swung at Cameron's face, but the trained karateka blocked the strike, preventing Todd from landing the blow. Todd tried to swing again, but Cameron was quicker. With his left hand, he swiftly struck Todd in the solar plexus and then delivered a right-handed punch to his chin. Todd hit the ground and didn't try to get up. Cameron and Drew left the property without any further obstacles. None of the other guests paid them any attention. "Are you headed to the town?" Cameron asked. "Yes," Drew replied, adding, "but I don't know the way." "It's easy," Cameron smiled. "We'll cut through the woods to the station, and then take a train to the town." After a brief silence, Cameron asked Drew, "Did he harass you?" "Yes," she answered. "He tore 2 buttons off my blouse and hit me in the face. He's a scumbag." "An absolute scumbag," Cameron muttered, clenching his fists. "Why did you even come with them?" "Well, I didn't know we were going to his house for his birthday party. Rose told me we were going to help a war veteran clean his house. I'm a volunteer, so I agreed." "Oh, I see. She tricked you," Cameron said. Getting home safely that day didn't go as planned for Cameron. At the town's railway station, the police were already waiting. They were checking documents at the exit. Unaware of any trouble, Cameron handed his student ID to an officer. The officer looked at it and asked, "Cameron Hawk?" "Yeah, that's me," Cameron replied. "Good. We've been looking for you, young man. You're under arrest, Cameron. Come with us." "Wait, what's this about?" Cameron asked, trying to understand why he was being arrested. "You'll find out at the station," the officer replied curtly. "Our job is to take you in, Cameron. Let's go." Drew, standing nearby, heard everything but didn't know why Cameron was being arrested. She looked at her rescuer sympathetically. As they put him in the car, Drew managed to shout, "Cameron, if I can help, I live in dorm 6, room 315. "Got it," he responded. "I'll remember." Cameron was driven to the police station, where everything became clear. He was detained on an oral complaint from Todd Burns. "Where's this complaint?" Cameron asked. "Show it to me." "Don't be in such a rush," the officer replied. "You'll see everything in due time. You don't seem to understand what you're in for, do you? Don't worry, you'll sit in the cell until morning and figure it out. The officer picked up the phone, pressed a button, and said, "Take this karate kid out of my office." "Yes, hold him in a cell until morning for identity verification." "But why a cell? I already gave your officers my student ID. Why verify my identity? I'm Cameron Hawk. Let me go home." The officer didn't answer. A duty officer came in and led the young man to a holding cell. "How long will I be here?" Cameron asked. "No more than 2 days," the duty officer replied. "Then a judge will decide what to do." "Wait, give me a phone, I need to call my mom," Cameron requested. They took mine. The officer handed him a basic phone and said, "Yeah, you've got a minute, no more. This isn't a phone booth." Cameron dialed his mom's number from memory. "Hi, Mom, don't worry. I'm at the police station. It's just a misunderstanding. If I don't come home tonight, know that I'm here. Bye, Mom." "No questions, I don't have much time." The officer took the phone and shut the door. The iron lock clanged loudly, and a heavy silence followed. The night passed with little sleep. Cameron drifted into a half-sleep for a few minutes at a time, but the burning thought that he was under arrest kept him from truly resting. He couldn't understand why he was in a cell. Was he really a dangerous criminal? After all, he had only defended a girl and struck her attacker. How could that be a crime? Morning arrived. Cameron could tell by the pale light filtering through the small barred window near the ceiling of his cell. Despite the new day, no one came for Cameron, he wasn't called anywhere, and it seemed like everyone had forgotten about him. He felt abandoned and that no one cared about him. The oppressive wait was suddenly broken by the sound of a key turning in the lock. The same officer from before said, "Cameron, come out." Cameron stood up and exited the cell. The officer locked the door and ordered, "Move forward down the corridor." A minute later, Cameron was back in the same office as yesterday. The same investigator addressed him. "So, Cameron, do you want to see the complaint? Here, take a look. There's the victim's statement, a medical certificate of injury, and witness testimonies. Basically, you're being accused of intentionally causing minor bodily harm. You're facing up to 2 years, kid." Cameron quickly skimmed through the papers. "Wait, but this isn't true. I didn't hit him, I was defending myself. Gary, Mike, and Rose are lying. They didn't see anything, they weren't nearby. They were inside the building. Only Drew saw everything. And her testimony isn't here." "Drew? Who's Drew?" the officer asked, puzzled. "The girl I was defending, who saw everything," Cameron replied. "She lives in dorm 6, room 315. "Oh, so we're missing this Drew's testimony? Well, it will be included. Meanwhile, you go back and wait." He picked up the phone and pressed a button. "Officer, take Cameron back. Let him sit a bit longer." 3 hours later, the conversation with the investigator continued. "Well, now we have Drew's testimony. By the way, who is she to you?" the officer asked, clearly pleased with how the case was shaping up. "No one, just an acquaintance," Cameron replied. "Good, just an acquaintance. I thought she was your girlfriend. I wouldn't want a girl like that. Here's what she said: you were the first to hit the victim, and no one was bothering her. She was just playing tag with the young man, and you misunderstood and started a fight. It was just a game. He chased her, she ran, then passionate love, nothing more." "What? She said that?" Cameron was stunned. "Yes, Cameron, she did, and she signed it. Girls, you can never tell what's on their minds. They're like that, a bit flighty, Cameron. Anyway, you'll spend another night here, you'll be fed, and tomorrow we'll go to the judge. I think the judge will extend your arrest for the investigation period. You're dangerous. We can't release you under any circumstances. That's it for today. Tomorrow, Well, tomorrow we'll see what happens. Cameron was led back to his cell. He knew Gary, Mike, and Rose couldn't have given truthful testimonies, they were completely under Todd's influence. But why did Drew lie? Had she been threatened, forced to lie? Cameron knew it was possible. The morning of the third day in custody brought an unexpected turn of events. Cameron was released. He had been preparing to face the judge, mentally rehearsing arguments to prove his innocence. But something unforeseen happened. The same investigator handling the case unexpectedly said, "Well, Cameron, your case is closed. Thank Warwick Burns, the victim's father. If it weren't for him, you'd be behind bars. Warwick doesn't want his name associated with a crime against his son, especially before the city council elections. You got lucky, athlete. You got off easy. But you'll still face consequences. I think you'll be expelled from the university." The investigator signed a release slip, handed it to the former suspect along with his phone and student ID, and said dryly, "Get out of here, Cameron." Cameron went home. His mother met him with tears, relieved that her son was finally released but also worried about the consequences he might face. "Cameron, honey, what about the university? Won't they expel you?" Cameron didn't want to lie to his mother and told her what the investigator had said. "Mom, they'll probably expel me. That's what the investigator said. I'll go to the university now and find out for sure. But don't worry." Yes, son," she comforted herself, "everything will be fine, Cameron." After freshening up, the young man went to the university. He went to the dean's office. The secretary looked at the popular freshman. "Wait a minute, Cameron. I'll see if the dean can see you." The dean received Cameron. "Well, athlete, we're expelling you. You have academic debt, and you missed half of the second semester. You're a truant, falling behind in your studies. Cameron, we don't need students like you." "You know why I missed classes," Cameron tried to explain. "I was at competitions. The coach told me my absences were approved by the dean's office, and I would clear my debt before the spring session. I made arrangements with the professor, sorted everything out." "No, Cameron, nothing was sorted," the dean suddenly said. "It won't work out, the issue is closed. If you want to re-enroll someday, write a withdrawal application. I'll sign it, and we'll forget about it. Then you can re-enroll. That's my advice. We're going to expel you anyway. You have a choice, and I don't. I was ordered from above to get rid of you from our university. There's nothing I can do, do you understand?" "Yes, I understand," Cameron replied. After writing the withdrawal application, Cameron left the dean's office and headed to the university gym to say goodbye to his coach. "Cameron. Cameron," he suddenly heard a familiar bright female voice. He didn't want to hear Drew's excuses but stopped nonetheless. She approached, not meeting his eyes, and said, "Please forgive me, Cameron. I didn't want to do it. But, the police officer said that if I didn't sign the statement, he would make sure I was expelled from the university and given a suspended sentence for provoking the fight. I was scared. Mostly for my mom. She's alone, struggling in the village, and if I got expelled, it would crush her. She's pinned all her hopes on me, Cameron. Forgive me if you can." Listening to Drew, Cameron's resentment towards her faded. "It's okay, Drew. Don't worry. I knew right away they forced you to say that. Take care of your mom. And know that I'm not mad at you. Thank you, Cameron. So, what now? They released you, will you keep studying here?" "They released me, but I won't be studying here. I'll probably join the army. Then we'll see." Cameron decided not to despair, despite Todd's attempts to ruin his life. It would likely be tough for him to stay in this town with Todd's connections everywhere and his desire for revenge. Cameron resolved to change his life dramatically and enlist in the army. Being an athlete, he was used to physical challenges, and the army would be a real school of life for him. 2 weeks after everything happened, Cameron stood in the military enlistment office square, dressed in a soldier's uniform. The military commissioner was giving a farewell speech to the recruits. Cameron found his mother in the crowd of onlookers and smiled at her. She smiled back, wiping away uninvited tears with a handkerchief. The train drew closer to the town where Cameron was born and raised. It had been a long time since he was last there. He didn't know what awaited him in his hometown. His last days there had not been happy. He had almost been jailed and forced to leave university. A year later, he lost his mother in this city. Later, his friend from the military, Seth, also passed away. What now? Cameron couldn't know. His heart was filled with both joy and anxiety. He suddenly remembered his first extended stay in the town 9 years ago, thinking he'd return in a year. But life had other plans. A year later, Cameron did return, but not permanently, only for his mother's funeral. She had died just 2 weeks before his discharge from the army. After burying his dearest one, Cameron decided to re-enlist, signing another contract. He realized that nothing was holding him in the town anymore. Moreover, during that year, Cameron had come to love the army. He felt fortunate to have served in the airborne forces and, after successful training, to have joined the special forces. For the former student, enduring physical exertion and following a strict daily routine was easy since he had been accustomed to it from childhood. In the army, fate brought the karateka together with real patriots, ready to lay down their lives for their country. One such hero was Cameron's commander, Senior Lieutenant Seth Kinsey. Cameron and Seth bonded from the first moments of their acquaintance, as they were from the same town. Moreover, their short life paths had many similarities. They both grew up without fathers and had been involved in sports from a young age, which helped them grow into honest, brave, and uncompromising individuals. After some time, Cameron was promoted to sergeant and became the deputy platoon commander, under Senior Lieutenant Seth Kinsey. The reconnaissance platoon, led by Seth, efficiently completed tasks to determine the enemy's coordinates for several months. For their bravery and successful missions, both Seth and Cameron were repeatedly awarded orders and medals. In one battle, the commander was severely wounded, but Cameron did everything to carry him out of the battlefield and get him to the hospital. Since then, they considered each other brothers and vowed to always be there for each other in tough times. 3 years into their service together, fate separated them. Seth left the army, while Cameron signed a new contract. But they remained in touch throughout the 5 years. Cameron knew about all the significant events in Seth's life. He knew that Seth went into business, met the love of his life, started a family, and had a son named Cameron after him. In their brief phone conversations, they dreamed of meeting again and continuing the business Seth had started. But it wasn't to be. Cameron learned of his friend's tragic death when he had only a year left on his contract. Now he was returning to the town where his brother's family remained. Cameron had never met Holly or young Cameron in person, but he knew of their existence and felt responsible for caring for and protecting them as he had promised his fallen comrade. Finally, the train pulled up to the platform and stopped. Cameron had arrived in his hometown. At the station square, he took a taxi home. The apartment he had left 9 years ago reminded him of his mother in every way. It seemed as though she would call out to him any moment and invite him for tea. She would say, "Cameron, the tea is ready. Come have breakfast." And he would respond, "Yes, yes, I'm coming." But his mother wasn't there to meet him. She wouldn't call out. She was gone. The apartment greeted the retired senior sergeant with a cold silence. Cameron, tired, sank onto the couch in the living room, facing a large antique mirror. 9 years in a war zone had left their mark on his appearance. His once youthful face had become harsh and weathered. His eyes no longer sparkled with the carefree joy of youth. They looked determined and focused. Cameron surveyed the room. Everything was as it had been and yet different. The furniture had aged, covered in dust, the wallpaper had yellowed, and cobwebs had appeared in the corners of the windows. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to an old photograph in a frame on the coffee table. Cameron picked it up. The picture showed him and his mother sitting by the sea, his mother smiling her radiant smile. He felt a lump in his throat. Cameron pressed the photo to his chest as if trying to hug his mother through it. It was hard to accept that he would never see her again. After sitting on the couch for a while, Cameron got up and headed to the bathroom. He needed to tidy up. After cleaning the apartment, he took a shower and went to the store. That night, Cameron decided to go to bed early to finally get some rest after his journey. In the morning, he planned to visit his friend's wife to learn more about the cause of Seth's death and to see if Holly and her son Cameron needed his help. Finally, Holly arrived from the farm. The day was sunny, with a gentle breeze in the air. As she entered the office, a security guard approached her. "Holly, a man was asking for you about 10 minutes ago." "Oh, what man? Where is he now?" "Well, I told him you hadn't arrived yet and asked him to come back later." "Thank you. When he arrives, please bring him to my office." "Will do." Holly recognized him immediately as he entered the office. "Hello, Cameron," she said, rising joyfully from her desk to greet him. "Hello, Holly. So, you've returned," she said, her tone turning serious. "It's a shame Seth didn't live to see it." Cameron touched her hand sympathetically. "Holly, please tell me what happened. I understand it's difficult for you to talk about it, but I need to know how my commander died." "All right, Cameron. I'll try to tell you everything I know. But I feel like I don't know much about this murky story." After finishing her story, Holly wiped her tears and fell silent. Cameron also remained quiet, processing what he had heard. "Are they still threatening you? Is it the elder Burns or the junior?" "The elder has been gone for 3 years now. He died of a heart attack, I think. Now his son Todd runs the whole meat empire. Until yesterday, he never spoke to me directly, only through his people. But yesterday, he called me himself. He insisted that no one tells him what to do, that he's the boss of the whole town. He demanded a meeting at Orion, told me to bring the company documents, and threatened me. He said I wouldn't have it easy if I didn't meet his demands. I'm scared. That scoundrel won't stop. But we'll try to handle him. Listen, I have a request for you." "What is it, Cameron?" "Tell me, I'd be happy to help. Hire me from today as your personal driver. This way, I'll be close to you, and you'll feel safer because you'll have to pay me a salary, and I'll have to follow your orders. It will take care of many issues. I have a driver's license. I have no health problems, either physical or mental. So, can you hire me?" Holly smiled. "Of course, I'll hire you. What salary should I set, Cameron?" "For the probation period, you can set the standard rate. We'll see how it goes. Maybe we won't work well together." "What are you saying?" "We'll definitely work well together. Seth told me about you. He said you're very disciplined and responsible." Holly picked up the phone and asked her secretary to come to her office. "Please come to my office for a minute." "Yes, right now. We need to draw up an employment contract." When Holly left the office that evening, her personal driver was already waiting by the car. Cameron politely opened the car door and carefully closed it after she got in. "It's quite nice to have a personal driver," Holly said, settling into the front passenger seat. "No need to worry about the rules, no fear of causing an accident." "So, where to, Holly?" asked Cameron. "Home or somewhere else?" "To the supermarket first. Then home." Near Holly's house, an SUV blocked their way. Cameron honked, signaling for the driver to move aside, but the vehicle remained stationary. Instead, 3 burly men got out and headed straight for Holly's car. One of them leaned on the car's roof, looming over Holly, and rudely said, "Todd sends his regards. You remember where he told you to go tomorrow and what to bring?" if you don't show up. Suddenly, the thug who had been threatening her cried out in pain and began to collapse to the ground. Holly turned her head to look for Cameron, but her personal driver was no longer beside her. Instead, she saw the second man on his knees in front of her car, clutching his groin with both hands. The third man lay nearby. "Holly, are you okay?" Cameron's voice came from her side as he opened the car door. She nodded and, bursting into tears, buried her face in Cameron's chest. There, don't be afraid and please don't cry," he said. "I'm here, I'm right here." Thank you, Holly whispered. "We need to report this to the police," Cameron said, nodding toward the men writhing on the ground. "Let them document the attack." Yes, Cameron, I'll call them right away." Soon, a patrol car arrived. The senior officer took statements from Holly and Cameron and promised to investigate. The uninvited guests who had threatened Holly were taken into the patrol car and driven to the station. "Cameron, I'm scared of them," Holly said as the police left. "Can you stay with me tonight? They'll be released when Burns calls the police, and they might come back." "Alright, I'll stay if you're afraid. But something tells me, Holly, that they won't return." Once inside her apartment with her guest, Holly said, "Make yourself at home, Cameron. Please wait in the living room for a few minutes while I prepare something for us. You can turn on the TV if you want." "Sure, don't worry, and take your time. I'm not very hungry." Cameron walked into the living room and sat in a chair. Seth's photo on the coffee table seemed to look at him as if he were alive. "Hello, Commander," Cameron said. "Here I am, visiting you, as I promised. It's a shame you couldn't wait for me." About 15 minutes later, Holly called Cameron to the kitchen. She had prepared dinner. "It's your first time in our home. You weren't at the funeral, right? Let's have a glass of wine for Seth. And also for our meeting, Cameron." She handed him a bottle of semi-dry red wine from the cabinet. "Holly, listen, where's the car Seth crashed in?" Cameron suddenly asked. "Was it scrapped or what happened to it?" "It's at the garage on the premises." "I ordered not to touch it," Holly replied. "I had a feeling you'd come and want to inspect it." "Good. And can you show me the place where the accident happened?" "Yes, of course. I'll definitely show you." Holly was about to say something else when the phone rang. She looked at the display and said fearfully, "It's him. Cameron, it's Burns." "Don't be afraid, I'm here with you," Cameron reassured her. "Answer it. Find out what he wants." Holly put the phone to her ear. "Hello, I'm listening." "Holly," Burns' mockingly polite voice came through, "Hello. I want to apologize for my men's behavior today. Don't be mad at them, they're simple guys, not used to polite dealings with ladies." There was a pause. Clearing his throat, Burns continued. "Holly, I take it you won't be coming to Orion tomorrow. Not interested in my offer, am I right?" "Yes, I won't come," Holly replied curtly. "All right then," Burns continued. "I'll wait, I'm a patient man. But my patience might run out eventually, I warn you. And yes, I heard Cameron is with you. Tell him those next 9 years in the army might not happen. Sure, he's a hero, covered in medals, right? But I fear those medals might be carried on a cushion in mournful silence, because anything can happen." Holly couldn't listen to him any longer. She shook her head, barely holding back tears. Cameron took the phone from her hand. "Todd. Hello. Why don't you say all this to me instead of Holly? Or are you only good at dealing with women? Remember how I punched you in the face on your birthday? I can do it again." "Oh, so you're already in bed with her, huh?" Burns replied. "You two got close fast." "Hey, hero, I don't get why you're with her. Aren't there other women? You could find someone younger." "Cameron, want me to find you a pure girl?" "I don't want anything from you," Cameron replied. But if I hear one more bad word about my commander's wife, you'll regret it, Todd. Got it? Yeah, I got it. But you don't seem to get it. You haven't gotten any smarter during your military service. That's what I understand. I used to think you were a friend, fool. Thought we'd walk through life together, but you turned out to be dumb. You're starting to piss me off. If I catch you, I'll strangle you. Well, that was a nice chat, Cameron said, handing the phone back to Holly. Now everything is clear. The enemy has revealed himself, Holly. We'll deal with it. She looked at him with undisguised admiration. With this stern and laconic man, Holly felt more at ease. She believed that Cameron wouldn't let anyone harm her. That night, Cameron didn't go home. Instead, he stayed at his late friend's apartment. Holly set up a bed for him on the couch in the living room. She was afraid to stay alone in the apartment, especially after Burns' ominous call. In the morning, they took a different route to the office. Holly wanted to show Cameron the spot where Seth's life tragically ended. At the place where Seth's car broke through the barrier, there were still faint traces. Cameron stopped the car, got out, and looked down at the accident site. It was clear that Seth had no chance of survival. Upon arriving at the office, Cameron took the garage keys and went to inspect what was left of the car. After a careful examination, he confirmed his suspicions: the accident was staged. The brake lines had been severed at their attachment points to the brackets. At first glance, it might have seemed like the rubber had burst from natural wear, but that wasn't the case. Seth must have been driving at a decent speed, but on the turn, he braked hard, causing the deliberately damaged lines to burst, and the brake pressure dropped to zero. He likely pulled the handbrake, as there wasn't time to pump the brakes, causing the car to skid. It probably overturned with the wheel turned to the left, broke through the barrier, and fell 11 feet down. This was evident even without a special investigation. However, it seemed the police were not interested in treating the accident as a deliberate crime. Hence, no one was looking for the culprits. Cameron closed the garage and returned to the office. Holly was already waiting for him, looking worried. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" Cameron asked. "Cameron, the police are calling you. A Major Fisher just called." "Well, they called." "It's nothing serious," Cameron reassured her. "Don't worry, Holly. I think it's about last night. They promised to investigate." "Should I go?" "Yes, go, but please be careful." "Of course, don't worry. But let's do this, Holly. First, I'll take you home, then I'll go to the police." Major Fisher turned out to be the officer who had handled Cameron's case 9 years ago for deliberately causing minor harm to Todd Burns. "Here we go again," the major asked, looking at Cameron with a hint of hostility as he entered the office. "Yes, it's me again," Cameron replied. "You're still the same, I see." "In what way?" Cameron asked. "Too bold. You like to convince people with your fists and feet," Fisher said. "Why do you do that?" "Listen, I was doing my job," Cameron said. "I was protecting my employer. My words to be more polite weren't heeded. Besides, they almost caused an accident." I know, Fisher said. "But, Cameron, you could have just locked yourself in the car and called the police, right? Instead of resorting to physical force. Do you have any complaints against them?" "No, I don't," Cameron replied. "And they don't have any against you either. I think it's thanks to Todd Burns again. I just don't understand why he's so lenient with you. You mess with him, and he saves you again. Truly a very humane person." "Yeah, super humane," Cameron sneered. "An angel, really." "Enough," Fisher said. "Here's your pass. You're free to go. I hope we won't meet again." "I hope so too. Goodbye." Leaving the police department, Cameron called Holly. "Hello, Holly. Everything's fine, I'm coming back. They have no complaints against us. "Oh, Cameron, I'm so glad it ended this way," she said. "Come back soon." Half an hour later, Cameron opened the door with his key and was already in the hallway. "Cameron, we need to go to the farm today. I haven't been there for more than 2 weeks. You haven't been there either, not even once. You need to know where it is for work. Shall we go?" "All right, let's go," Cameron agreed without hesitation. On the way, Holly explained why Seth had rented the bankrupt farm. She said her late husband had dreamed of and implemented a business model based on producing environmentally friendly raw materials for their meat processing plant's products. "Do you understand, Cameron?" she said. "It's a closed-loop system. We raise meat-producing animals, process the raw materials, and sell them without needing to buy unknown meat. People trust us, which is the most important thing. Our products are sold in chain stores, and we have 3 of our own brand stores. Our sausages and semi-finished products are tasty and healthy. People like them, and that's why Burns is trying to take this business from me. That's why Seth isn't with us now." When they were about 3 miles away from the farm, Cameron and Holly saw black smoke rising into the sky. Something was burning heavily in the direction of Holly's livestock buildings. Holly's face changed. "Cameron," she exclaimed. "It looks like the building where the newborn calves are kept is on fire. Please, hurry." Cameron, who had been driving cautiously on the dirt road, stepped on the gas. Indeed, the calf barn was on fire. Most of the building was engulfed in flames. Several employees were trying to save the newborn calves, either driving them out or carrying them in their arms. Inside, the flames were devouring the wooden walls and roof. The cries and moos of the calves echoed across the farm. The workers bravely fought the fire using whatever means they could, but the flames spread quickly. After stopping the car, Cameron rushed to save the helpless animals. He grabbed a bucket of water from one of the men fighting the fire, poured it over himself, and charged into the burning building. A few moments later, about 20 calves ran out of the open doors, followed by Cameron himself, carrying a helpless calf in his arms. The little one took a few breaths of fresh air, tried to stand on its still weak legs, and managed to stand, albeit shakily, after a minute. "There's no one else in there," Cameron said, taking off his soaked jacket. "The building is empty, I checked everything." Holly rushed to him, handed him a handkerchief to wipe his face, and whispered in relief. "Cameron, thank God. You're alive. I was so scared for you." The fire truck arrived, but by then, only a few smoldering logs and ashes remained of the building. The animals had been saved and were already placed in a neighboring empty structure. After giving a few instructions, Holly returned to the car. "I think the firefighters will quickly find the cause of the fire," she said. "They'll say it was due to old electrical wiring that hadn't been replaced since the building was constructed. But the wiring was replaced, that's the thing. Seth told me about it. The manager also said the wiring was in good condition. So, it's arson. It's Burns again. Cameron, I don't know what to do." "Holly, calm down. We'll figure something out," Cameron replied. Holly could see and sense that Cameron was preparing for something, but he hadn't told her what it was yet. That evening, after dinner, Cameron said he needed to check something and left. She was alone in the apartment when the phone rang. The number on the display indicated it was Burns. She answered reluctantly and irritably. "What now? What more do you want from me?" "Holly, why are you so nervous?" Todd mocked. "Did something happen?" "Oh, I'm sorry, I heard you had a fire." "My condolences. Any idea why the building caught fire? Maybe it's time to understand why you're having all these problems. When will you get smart? By the way, my offer still stands. I have breakfast at Orion every day. If you decide to come, be there at 10 in the morning. But there's one condition. Bring the documents." Holly put the phone on the table, clasped her head in her hands, and sat in complete despair for a few seconds. Her heart was pounding. Then she picked up the phone again. "Hello, Cameron." He called again, mocking me as always, and suggested I come to the restaurant with the documents to hand over the business to him. "I don't know what to do. Please come quickly, I'll be waiting." Cameron arrived quickly and tried to calm Holly. "Understand, he's doing this on purpose. He wants to break you mentally. But I'm here with you. Holly, don't be afraid, he won't dare touch you. Next time, just don't answer. Don't pick up unfamiliar numbers. And trust me, Burns will soon be out of your life." "Cameron, are you planning something?" Holly asked. "I'm afraid for you. It's dangerous to get involved with him. I don't want to lose you too. I've already lost one dear person. I don't want to lose anyone else, not you, not my son. I can't handle it. Listen, I've decided, I'll go to Orion. I'll give him everything. Let him choke on it, but I'll stop fearing for us." "No, you can't do that," Cameron replied firmly. "Your sacrifice would be in vain. People like Burns don't understand words, they don't feel pain. If you go and willingly give him the business, you'll betray Seth. You'll betray your son, for whom his father worked so hard. Burns will just feel even more untouchable and entitled. He'll destroy more lives. This cannot be allowed. He must be held accountable. Cameron, but I'm scared for you. It's dangerous and frightening to fight him, understand? Not scarier than being at war, Holly." On Saturday morning, as Cameron and Holly were just waking up, the phone rang. Holly looked at the display. "Angela, a friend." She smiled and asked Cameron, "Should I answer?" He nodded approvingly. "Angela, hello." Holly said joyfully. Holly listened to Angela and occasionally asked questions. "What, today? Out of town? And where?" Then she covered the smartphone with her hand for a moment. "Listen, Cameron, shall we go out of town to Lakewood for a birthday party?" He nodded several times and said, "Yes, yes, agree." Until their departure, Holly had the impression that Cameron seemed noticeably happier, as if he was looking forward to something. "Shall we take a taxi or our own car?" she asked, ready to leave. "Whatever you prefer, beautiful," Cameron replied, admiring Holly in her elegant attire. "But I think it's better to take our own car. You won't drink too much, Mr. Driver." "I might get drunk, boss," Cameron joked back. "But we're staying overnight. And tomorrow is Sunday, my legitimate day off. Plus, you have a license, right?" "Well then, I won't call a taxi," Holly said, showing she was ready for her friend's husband's birthday party. Cameron looked at his companion with love, kissed her on the cheek, and said, "Let's go, darling." They left the house, got into the car, and drove to Lakewood. The weather was perfect. It had been cloudy yesterday, but today the sun was shining brightly. There wasn't a single cloud in the blue sky. They drove to a suburban cottage community where affluent people tired of living in high-rise buildings had settled. The wealthy bought multiple adjacent plots and built entire estates. Seth had often mentioned this place to Holly, but she had never been here before. He had told her several times that once his business truly flourished, they would move there, to their own home. But alas, that never happened. Crossing over the railroad tracks, the car drove along a forest road for a few minutes before arriving at their destination. Holly admired the beautiful houses lining both sides of the road, appreciating Seth's dream. Yes, it was indeed a very beautiful place. "Cameron, why is the settlement called Lakewood?" asked Holly. "Is there a lake here?" "Of course," he replied. "To the right, behind the houses, there used to be an old riverbed. There are many lakes there, suitable for swimming and fishing." "Really? This is my first time here," she said. "Look, Cameron, whose house is that?" Cameron knew well whose huge, wealthy house it was, but he answered as if seeing it for the first time. "Oh, Holly, honestly, I don't know. Probably some poor guy built it. You can tell it's just a shack." "Ah, a shack. Only worth 100 million, Holly smiled. "By the way, we're almost there. That was the 50th house, and we need the 12th. "Yeah, I know. I've got the GPS. A few minutes later, they parked near the house where they were invited for the birthday party. Holly took out her phone from her bag and dialed Angela's number. "Hello, Angela, we've arrived, we're at the gate." The iron gates creaked open, and their halves swung apart. Cameron cautiously moved the car forward, and within moments, they were in the spacious yard. The hosts had set up a table on the terrace, adorned with blooming clematis. It was very fitting as the evening turned out warm and tranquil. The homeowner, Flynn, had turned 35 today but looked a decade older. Angela looked at Holly's companion with envy and whispered to her, "You're lucky, friend. Another handsome guy, I'm jealous." At the table, Cameron revealed a side that Holly hadn't suspected. He joked, smiled, told anecdotes, and interesting stories. Holly also noticed that Cameron drank very little but pretended to be as drunk as the guest of honor. As the evening drew to a close and Flynn began to doze off, slightly tipsy Angela said, winking at Holly, "Mind you, our house may not be small, but there's only one guest room, so you two will have to share." "Are you already sharing, or not until the wedding?" Holly blushed slightly, and Cameron answered for both of them. "Yes, we'll be sleeping together. I'm her bodyguard and driver. I can't sleep separately. Holly, you set up on the bed, and I'll take the mat next to it." By midnight, the terrace had emptied, and the hosts and guests had dispersed to their bedrooms. In the middle of the night, Holly suddenly woke up and reached out to embrace her faithful bodyguard. But Cameron wasn't in bed. She lay there for a few minutes, listening to the quiet of the night. Then she picked up her phone to check the time. The smartphone screen showed 2:10. 2 o'clock in the morning. Where is he? She worried. Maybe in the bathroom? Holly wanted to get out of bed and leave the room, but then she heard familiar footsteps. Cameron quietly opened the door, tiptoed in holding something in his left hand. Shedding his shirt and jeans, Cameron quietly approached the bed. "I see and hear everything," said Holly. "You don't have to be careful." "I'm not being careful, my joy," he replied. "I was just afraid to wake you." He lay down on the bed and gently pulled her close. "Where have you been?" she asked. "Just went to the car, sweetheart." "What for? Did you need something?" "Yeah, something." "What's that you have?" "A bottle of brandy." Holly chuckled silently and said, "Are you planning to drink?" "Yeah." "Want me to give you a sip?" "No thanks," Holly replied. "You drink alone." "I need to sleep. I have to drive tomorrow." Cameron poured himself a glass of brandy and drank it in one go. Then he lay down in bed, turned onto his side, and tried to fall asleep. But for some time, images of recent events still floated in his mind. It took Cameron about 10 minutes to reach Burns' house. He climbed over the fence at the back of the house and stealthily made his way to it. About 500 feet away, a security guard dozed off in a booth near the gates. The hall on the first floor was lit, and music played softly. Peering through a window, Cameron saw familiar faces, Gary and Mike, sitting on a couch in a lethargic, relaxed state. It seemed they were both high and not thinking straight. Todd himself, dressed in a home bathrobe, sat at the head of the table in an armchair. He was saying something, periodically sipping from a glass and refilling it with a light amber liquid from a bottle. Cameron waited. Finally, Todd stood up, stretched like an old lazy cat, and headed towards the exit. Standing near the house for a couple of minutes, Todd then walked towards the pool. Approaching the pool, which was lined with bluish electric lights around its perimeter, the homeowner stopped and seemed to decide to take a swim. He began to remove his bathrobe when suddenly, Cameron approached from behind and said, "Hello, Todd. Aren't you afraid of catching a cold?" Startled, Todd quickly turned at the sound of Cameron's voice, his eyes bulging with surprise. "Cameron? Is that you? How did you get here?" "Just like that," Cameron replied. "Came to see how you try to suffocate me. Come on, let's do it. You promised over the phone. Here I am." Cameron took a step towards Todd. Todd flinched, then quickly turned to run back into the house but lost his balance and fell. Cameron distinctly heard the sound of Todd's balding head hitting the brick edge of the pool, tiled with ceramic. Todd wheezed and slipped into the water. Cameron stood by the pool's edge for a few seconds, suppressing the instinct to jump into the water and pull Todd out. He didn't do it. Cameron turned decisively and headed towards the fence, intending to leave the confines of this vast house forever. Holly was awakened by an unexpected phone call. It was Cameron's phone calling. The man didn't pick up, he was sleeping deeply, evidenced by the nearly empty bottle of brandy on the bedside table. The phone went silent, but it rang again a few minutes later. This time, Holly picked up her smartphone. "Hello." There was a brief silence, then a male voice spoke up. "Is this Cameron Hawk's number?" "Yes," confirmed Holly. "Can I speak with him?" "Unfortunately, he can't talk right now." "Please call back later," she replied. "What do you mean he can't talk right now?" "This is Major Fisher from the police." "I'm not going to wait. Get Cameron on the phone." "Please calm down," Holly said clearly. "It's Cameron's day off, he's resting. If you need him, summon him properly, as protocol dictates." The tone of the policeman suddenly changed. "Oh, sorry. And you're Holly Kinsey, right?" "You're correct," confirmed Holly. "Holly, once again, I apologize," said Fisher. "If you don't mind me asking, where is Cameron resting? I really need to see him. Could you please give me the address?" Holly didn't know what to do, but for some reason, she decided to tell him where she and Cameron were currently staying. "Lakewood," she said. "Line Street 12. "Oh, Line Street 12. "Thank you, Holly," said the major. A few minutes later, screeching brakes echoed near Flynn and Angela's house. Immediately, a dog started barking in the yard. Flynn stepped out into the yard, and within a minute, 2 police officers entered the house. "Hello, where's Cameron?" asked the major, showing his badge. "Cameron?" the homeowner asked in surprise. Yes, Cameron Hawk. "He seems to have stayed here," said the major. "Well, he's on the 2nd floor, in the guest room," said the homeowner, holding his head. "He's there with Holly." "Why?" "Let's go, show us to him," the major requested. Accompanied by the police officers, Flynn climbed to the 2nd floor and knocked on the door of the guest room. "Holly. Cameron. Are you in there? You awake? Guests are here. Are you not sleeping?" "Flynn, who are these guests if we're guests at your place?" Holly's voice came from behind the door. A second later, she opened the door and stepped into the hallway. "Oh, it's you, Major Fisher. You're here fast. But Cameron is still asleep. Wake him up," Fisher requested, "or let me through. This is very serious. Todd Burns tragically died tonight, possibly murdered. Your chauffeur Cameron is a suspect, he had multiple conflicts with the deceased. Understand?" The news of Burns' death shocked Holly, but she knew Cameron had been with her all night and had nothing to do with it. The homeowners could confirm this too. Holly swung open the door. "Come in, but he's still asleep." Cameron was indeed asleep. "Wake him up," Major Fisher ordered his subordinate. The policeman managed to wake Cameron, who looked surprised as he stared at the officers. Finally, he addressed Fisher. "Ah, it's you, Major." "Yes, it's me. Where were you last night?" Fisher asked, eyeing the nearly empty brandy bottle. Cameron tried to answer but couldn't and flopped back onto the bed. I don't understand, what does Cameron have to do with this? He was with me here, Holly spoke up for him. The policeman turned to Holly, asking her almost the same question. So he was here all night? Didn't leave the room at all? We were on the terrace. Then we went to our rooms. Yes, he was with me and didn't leave, she confirmed. Yes, I can confirm that too. No one left my property, Flynn, the homeowner, added, we were celebrating my birthday here yesterday. He was quite drunk. Well, so was I. Where could he have gone? He wouldn't have been able to. He can't even now. My head hurts. Can your wife confirm he was at your house all night? Fisher asked. Of course she can. Just please don't shout like that, the homeowner replied, I can call her right now. Holly suddenly grew tired of the barrage of questions. Unable to hold back, she sharply addressed the police officer. How much longer do we have to answer your questions? Can't you see Cameron has nothing to do with this tragedy? I think we've answered your question. Let us rest. Are we criminals or something? Maybe I should call my lawyer right now. Or file a complaint against you tomorrow, huh? Is that what you want? We have nothing to do with Burns' death. Major Fisher quickly realized Burns was already dead. And the lady before him was a respected businessman. Perhaps she would prove to be influential in time. All right, Holly, we'll draw up a report and leave, the officer said in a friendly tone. The major's assistant quickly drafted the report, showed it to Fisher, who checked it over before handing it to Holly. She carefully read through it and signed. Flynn and his wife, Angela, did the same. Finally, the police officers left the house. 2 hours later, Cameron took a shower and sat on the terrace with Holly and the homeowners, sipping tea. Cameron, listen, how about a drink? Flynn asked. No, thank you. That won't do. I overdid it yesterday, Cameron replied. Yeah, you shouldn't have drunk so much brandy, Flynn said. Yes, shouldn't have, Cameron agreed, but that's just how I am. If I'm going to drink, I drink till the end. And if I'm going to love, then till death. Holly looked at Cameron and smiled. Angela noticed. And my Flynn thinks the same way about love, right? Of course, my dear, Flynn replied. They were driving back to the town as the hot summer sun began to dip towards the horizon. Holly was at the wheel, with Cameron in the passenger seat, reclining against the backrest. When their car pulled up alongside house number 50, where a police car was parked, Holly asked. Is that his house? Burns? Yes, Cameron replied. She fell silent for a moment and then asked a second question. Cameron, did you? No, Holly, it was him. I swear to you. He tried to run away from me, tripped, and fell. That's what happened. The next day, the city news reported that Todd Burns, a well-known businessman, had passed away unexpectedly at his country home. No details of his death were provided, it was deemed an accident. Rumors quickly spread that Todd Burns had been drinking heavily and drowned in his own pool. The following weekend, Cameron and Holly drove to Viewstone. Cameron was eager to see his namesake, Seth's son. Holly was keen to introduce Cameron to her son and Barbara. Finally, the meeting took place. I know who you are, the boy said upon seeing Cameron. You're Dad's friend. You're in Dad's album. I recognized you. That's right, Cameron smiled. And who are you? Me. I'm Cameron Kinsey, the boy replied. Well, I'm Cameron Hawk. Pretty cool, huh? We're both Camerons. Yeah, I guess we are. Both Camerons. So, shall we be friends? Yes, let's, the boy answered. Seth's mother, Barbara, immediately understood upon seeing Holly and Cameron. Live harmoniously, dear ones, she said, seeing them off into the city. Love each other. And please, take care of Cameron. He's all I have left. You're not to blame for anything. This is how things were meant to happen. And please, Holly, Cameron, come visit me more often with your grandson. I'll always be happy to see you,